Ethan Cross, 28-year-old virgin, never imagined his late-night cleaning shift would change his life. The CEO's office on the 47th floor was supposed to be empty, but Damon Kane, 6 feet 5 inches, powerfully built, with skin like polished mahogany, was still there, working, watching. And when their eyes met, Ethan felt something he'd spent years denying ignite inside him like wildfire. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you're watching from and don't forget to click subscribe. Ethan Cross had perfected the art of being invisible. At 28, he'd spent 6 years working the night cleaning shift at Kane Enterprises, moving through empty offices like a ghost, wiping down desks and emptying trash bins while the corporate world slept. He preferred it this way. No awkward small talk, no forced smiles, no need to explain himself to anyone. The night shift paid better than day work, and more importantly, it kept him away from people, away from questions he didn't want to answer, away from expectations he'd never been able to meet. Ethan had always known he was different, growing up in a small Midwestern town where everyone knew everyone, where the church was the center of social life and deviation from the norm was met with suspicion at best and hostility at worst. He'd learned early to hide the parts of himself that didn't fit, the parts that noticed other boys instead of girls, the parts that made his heart race when he accidentally brushed against another man in the locker room. So he'd buried it so deep that by the time he left home at 22 and moved to the city, he'd almost convinced himself it wasn't real, almost convinced himself that he just hadn't met the right woman yet, that the hollow feeling in his chest was just loneliness, not the ache of denying his own truth. 6 years in the city, and Ethan had built a life of careful isolation, a small studio apartment in a neighborhood where no one asked questions, a job that required no social interaction, a routine that kept him moving, kept him too busy to think about the fact that he'd never been touched, never been kissed, never let anyone close enough to see the parts of himself he kept locked away. He told himself it was easier this way, safer, that the loneliness was a small price to pay for not having to face the truth of who he was. But then came that Tuesday night in October, the night everything changed. Ethan pushed his cleaning cart off the elevator onto the 47th floor at exactly 11 p.m., just like he did every Tuesday and Thursday. The executive level was always empty by this time. The high-powered lawyers and finance guys who occupied these offices were long gone, off to their expensive homes and families, leaving behind only the detritus of their important work for him to clean up. He liked the executive floor best. It was quiet, carpeted, insulated from the noise of the city below. The offices were spacious and well-appointed, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the glittering cityscape. Sometimes, when he was sure he was alone, Ethan would stand at those windows and imagine what it would be like to be one of them. Powerful, confident, belonging in spaces like this, instead of just passing through in the darkness. But tonight was different. Tonight, as Ethan wheeled his cart past the executive suite toward the corner office, he saw light spilling out from under the door. He stopped, confused. In 6 years, he'd never encountered anyone working this late. The executives were devoted to their careers, sure, but even they had limits. The corner office belonged to the CEO himself, Damon Kane, founder and head of Kane Enterprises. Ethan had seen him exactly 3 times in 6 years, always from a distance, always in passing. A tall, imposing figure in expensive suits, radiating the kind of authority that made people step aside without being asked. Ethan hesitated, his hand on the cleaning cart. He could skip this office, come back tomorrow when it was empty. That would be the smart thing to do, the invisible thing to do. But his supervisor had been very clear. Every office, every night, no exceptions. The executives paid premium prices for premium service, and that meant consistency. Taking a deep breath, Ethan knocked softly on the doorframe. No response. He knocked again, a little louder this time, and called out, "Cleaning service. I can come back later if you need more time." Still nothing. Maybe whoever was in there had headphones on or was on a call. Ethan stood there for another moment, then made a decision. He'd just peek in, see if the person was too busy to be disturbed. If so, he'd skip it for tonight. He pushed the door open slowly, and his breath caught in his throat. Damon Kane sat behind his massive desk, the glow from his computer screen casting shadows across his face. He was focused intently on whatever he was reading, one hand absently rubbing his temple, while the other moved his mouse in small, precise movements. Ethan had never seen him this close, and the impact was immediate and visceral. Damon was stunning. His skin was a rich, deep brown that seemed to glow even in the artificial light. His head was shaved smooth, emphasizing the strong lines of his skull and the sharp angle of his jaw. He wore a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing powerful forearms that spoke of hours spent in a gym. Even sitting down, his size was evident. Broad shoulders that strained against the expensive fabric, large hands that made the mouse look small. But it was his face that held Ethan frozen in the doorway. High cheekbones, a nose that had maybe been broken once and set slightly crooked, full lips pressed together in concentration. And his eyes, even from across the room, Ethan could see they were dark and intense, framed by long lashes that seemed almost unfair on such an aggressively masculine face. Ethan's heart was hammering in his chest, his mouth suddenly dry. Heat flooded through his body, pooling low in his belly in a way that was achingly familiar from his private moments alone, but terrifying in its intensity here and now. Standing in the presence of an actual man who could see him, could judge him, could know he should leave. He should back out quietly and pretend this never happened. But his feet wouldn't move. He couldn't stop staring at Damon Kane, couldn't stop noticing every detail. The way his fingers moved across the keyboard, the slight furrow between his brows, the strong column of his throat visible above his collar. And then Damon looked up. Their eyes met, and Ethan felt like he'd been struck by lightning. Damon's eyes were dark brown, almost black, and the way they focused on Ethan, really focused, like he was seeing him, truly seeing him for the first time in his life, made Ethan's knees weak. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Ethan couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stand there pinned by that gaze. Then Damon's lips curved into a small smile, transforming his face from intimidating to devastating. "You must be the night cleaner," he said, his voice deep and smooth like honey over gravel. "I'm sorry. I should have let someone know I'd be working late. You can come in. I won't be in your way." Ethan tried to respond, but no words came out. He cleared his throat, tried again. I can come back. If you're busy, I don't want to disturb you." His voice came out higher than normal, slightly shaky, and he wanted to die from embarrassment. Damon's smile widened slightly, like he found Ethan's nervousness endearing rather than pathetic. "You're not disturbing me. I need a break anyway. Been staring at these reports for 3 hours and the numbers are starting to blur together." He leaned back in his chair, stretching his arms above his head, and Ethan had to look away from the way the movement made his shirt pull tight across his chest. "Come in," Damon said again, his voice gentler this time. "Please, I could use the company, even if it's just someone else in the room while I pretend to work." The invitation was casual, but something in Damon's eyes made it feel like more. Made it feel significant in a way Ethan couldn't name, but recognized bone deep. He pushed his cart into the office, hyper-aware of every sound, the squeak of the wheels on the plush carpet, his own breathing, the soft rustle of his uniform. The office was enormous, easily 3 times the size of Ethan's entire apartment. One wall was entirely glass, offering a panoramic view of the city stretched out below like scattered jewels on black velvet. The other walls held expensive art and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, but the center of the room was dominated by Damon's desk, a massive thing of dark wood and clean lines that probably cost more than Ethan made in a year. And behind it sat Damon himself, watching Ethan with an expression that made Ethan's skin feel too tight. "I'm Damon," he said, standing up to his full height, and Ethan had to crane his neck to look up at him. Damon was easily 6'5", maybe taller, with the kind of build that came from both genetics and dedication, broad through the shoulders and chest, narrow at the waist, moving with an easy grace that belied his size. "I know," Ethan said, then winced. "I mean, everyone knows. You're the CEO. I'm Ethan. I clean your office, obviously." He gestured helplessly at his cart, feeling more awkward by the second. Damon's smile was warm, without a trace of mockery. "Nice to finally meet you, Ethan. I've been meaning to introduce myself. I see your work every morning when I come in. You do an excellent job." The compliment shouldn't have meant as much as it did. It was just being polite, just the kind of things successful people said to service workers to make themselves feel magnanimous. But the way Damon said it, with genuine warmth and direct eye contact, made Ethan feel seen in a way he never had before. "Thank you," Ethan managed. I'll be quick. You won't even know I'm here." "Take your time," Damon said, settling back into his chair. "Like I said, I could use the break from these reports." Ethan nodded and turned to his cart, pulling out his supplies with hands that trembled slightly. He started with the trash bins, trying to focus on the familiar routine rather than the overwhelming presence of the man watching him from behind the desk. But he could feel Damon's eyes on him, could feel the weight of that gaze tracking his movements as he emptied the trash, as he wiped down the conference table in the corner, as he straightened the chairs. The silence should have been uncomfortable, but instead it felt charged, electric, like the air before a thunderstorm. "How long have you worked here?" Damon asked suddenly, and Ethan jumped, nearly dropping his cleaning cloth. 6 years, he said, not turning around. "Since I moved to the city." 6 years, Damon repeated thoughtfully, "and in all that time, we've never spoken. That seems like a failure on my part." "You're busy," Ethan said quickly. "Important. You don't need to... I'm just..." "Just what?" Damon's voice had an edge to it now, something that made Ethan turn around to face him. "Just the person who keeps this office immaculate? Just the reason I can come in every morning to a clean, organized space that helps me think clearly? Just the invisible service worker I'm supposed to ignore?" The words weren't angry, but they were intense, and Ethan found himself taking a step back from the force of them. "I don't ignore people, Ethan," Damon continued, his dark eyes holding Ethan's. "And I especially don't ignore people who work as hard as you clearly do. 6 years of perfect work, and we've never had a conversation. That changes tonight." Ethan's heart was racing again, and he didn't know if it was fear or something else entirely. I'm not very good at conversation, sir." The "sir" slipped out automatically, a habit from his childhood of deference to authority. But the way Damon's eyes darkened at the word, the way his jaw tightened slightly, sent a jolt through Ethan's body that he felt all the way to his toes. "Just Damon," he said, his voice lower now, rougher. "I'm not your boss, Ethan. I own the company, but you work for the cleaning service we contract with. Which means right now in this office, we're just two people having a conversation. No hierarchy, no power dynamic, just two men talking. Can you do that?" Two men. The phrase echoed in Ethan's head, loaded with meaning he wasn't sure was really there, or just wishful thinking from his starved, desperate imagination. "I can try," Ethan said quietly. Damon's smile returned, warm and approving. "Good. Then tell me about yourself. Where are you from? What brought you to the city?" And somehow, impossibly, Ethan found himself talking. Found himself sharing details about his small-town childhood that he never shared with anyone. About leaving home because he couldn't breathe there anymore. Couldn't keep pretending to be someone he wasn't. About coming to the city with nothing but a duffel bag and hope that here, in the anonymity of millions of people, he could finally just exist without judgment. He didn't say the specific reason he'd left. Didn't mention the word gay or talk about the nights he'd spent as a teenager hating himself for thoughts he couldn't control. But somehow, he thought Damon understood anyway. Thought he heard the unspoken words beneath Ethan's careful explanations. Damon listened without interrupting, his full attention focused on Ethan in a way that was both terrifying and intoxicating. When Ethan finally ran out of words, trailing off with a self-conscious shrug, Damon was quiet for a moment. That must have taken a lot of courage, he said finally, leaving everything familiar to start over alone in a city where you knew no one. It didn't feel brave, Ethan admitted. It felt like survival. Sometimes survival is the bravest thing we can do. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with understanding. Ethan wondered what Damon was seeing in his face, what truths his expression was betraying despite his best efforts to stay neutral. "What about you?" Ethan heard himself ask, surprising himself with his boldness. "How did you end up here, running all this?" Damon leaned back in his chair, considering the question. "Similar story, actually. Different details, but the same core. Leaving a place where I didn't fit. Coming to the city to build something new. I was 23, fresh out of business school with more ambition than sense. Started this company in a basement office with 2 employees and a dream that everyone said was impossible. Clearly they were wrong," Ethan said, gesturing at the expansive office around them. "Clearly," Damon agreed with a small smile. "But it wasn't easy. Building something from nothing never is. There were years where I worked 20-hour days, where I went to bed wondering if the company would survive another month. Years where I sacrificed everything else, relationships, friendships, any semblance of a personal life, to make this work." There was something in his voice, a note of regret or loneliness, that resonated with Ethan's own isolation. "Do you regret it?" Ethan asked quietly. "The sacrifice?" Damon thought about that for a long moment. "I regret the loneliness," he said finally. "I regret that I'm 42 years old and I come home every night to an empty penthouse. I regret that I've been so focused on building this empire that I forgot to build a life." His eyes met Ethan's again, and there was something raw in them now, something vulnerable. Success is cold comfort when you have no one to share it with. The honesty of the admission took Ethan's breath away. This wasn't CEO speak, wasn't the polished corporate persona. This was real, and it was being offered to him. Ethan Cross, nobody night cleaner, like a gift. "I understand that," Ethan said softly. "The loneliness. I understand that more than you know." "I think you do," Damon said, and the way he looked at Ethan made it clear he saw more than Ethan had said. Saw the truth that Ethan had spent 6 years hiding. "I think we're more alike than our different circumstances would suggest." The air in the room had changed, become heavier somehow, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Ethan knew he should make an excuse, finish his cleaning, and get out before he did something stupid, before he let himself hope for something that couldn't possibly be real. But he couldn't make himself move, couldn't make himself look away from Damon's intense gaze. "Can I ask you something?" Damon said, his voice careful, like he was approaching a skittish animal. "And you can tell me if I'm completely out of line." Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice. "Have you ever let yourself want something? Really want something, without worrying about whether it's appropriate or safe or acceptable to anyone else?" The question landed like a physical blow, cutting straight through all of Ethan's carefully constructed defenses. "No," he whispered. "I don't think I've ever let myself want anything." "Why not?" "Because wanting things is dangerous. Wanting things means risking disappointment. Or worse, risking people finding out what you want and using it against you." Damon stood up slowly, moving around his desk with deliberate care, like he didn't want to spook Ethan. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that Ethan could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine with notes of cedar and spice. "What if I told you it was safe?" Damon said softly. "What if I told you that in this office, at this moment, you could want whatever you wanted without fear of judgment or consequences?" Ethan's breath was coming faster now, his heart pounding so hard he was sure Damon could hear it. "I wouldn't believe you. Nothing is safe." "You're right," Damon acknowledged. "Nothing is perfectly safe, but Ethan..." He took a step closer, and Ethan could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the way his chest rose and fell with his own quickened breathing. "Some risks are worth taking. Some wants are worth the danger." "What are you saying?" Ethan's voice was barely audible, shaking with the effort of holding himself still, when every instinct screamed at him to either run or move closer. He wasn't sure which. "I'm saying I see you, Ethan Cross. I see the way you've been looking at me since you walked in that door. I see the want you're trying so hard to hide, and I'm telling you it's not one-sided." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and terrifying, and everything Ethan had never let himself dream about. "You don't," Ethan started, but Damon cut him off with a slight shake of his head. "I don't what? Know what I'm saying? Know what I want? I'm 42 years old, Ethan. I've spent 2 decades building this company, mastering every aspect of business and negotiation and human psychology. I know exactly what I'm saying, and I know exactly what I want." "What do you want?" The question escaped before Ethan could stop it, desperate and pleading. Damon's eyes darkened, his gaze dropping to Ethan's mouth before slowly traveling back up. I want you. I want to know what it would feel like to touch someone who looks at me like you're looking at me right now. Like I'm not a CEO or a success story or a trophy to be won. Like I'm just a man you want." Ethan couldn't breathe. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Men like Damon Kane didn't want men like Ethan Cross. Didn't see invisible night cleaners and feel desire. Didn't offer themselves up with raw honesty that stripped away every pretense. "I've never," Ethan's voice cracked. "I've never been with anyone. Ever. I don't know how to. I wouldn't know what to." Understanding dawned in Damon's eyes, followed by something that looked like wonder. "You've never been with a man?" "I've never been with anyone," Ethan clarified, his face burning with shame. "Man or woman. I'm 28 years old, and I've never even been kissed. I've spent my entire life running from what I am, and now you're standing here saying these things, and I don't know if you're serious or if this is some kind of test or—" Damon closed the remaining distance between them in one long stride, his hands coming up to frame Ethan's face with surprising gentleness. His palms were warm and slightly rough against Ethan's cheeks, his thumbs brushing away tears that Ethan hadn't realized were falling. "Look at me," Damon commanded softly, and Ethan couldn't do anything but obey, tilting his head back to meet those intense dark eyes. "I am deadly serious. This is not a test. This is me, Damon Kane, telling you that I want you, Ethan Cross, more than I've wanted anyone, in longer than I can remember. And if you want me too, if you want to know what it feels like to be touched and desired and cherished, then I'm offering myself. Right here, right now. No games, no tricks. Just honesty." "Why?" Ethan whispered. "Why me? You could have anyone. Because when you walked through that door tonight, you looked at me like I was the answer to a prayer you'd been too afraid to say out loud. Because I've been alone for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen as a person instead of a position. Because something about you calls to something in me, and I'm tired of ignoring what I want in favor of what's appropriate or expected." Damon's thumbs continued their gentle motion across Ethan's cheeks, and Ethan found himself leaning into the touch like a man dying of thirst finally finding water. "I'm scared," Ethan admitted, the words barely audible. "I know. So am I." Damon's lips curved into a small smile. "But Ethan, being scared doesn't mean we have to stop. It just means what we're doing matters, that it's real." "I don't know what to do," Ethan said helplessly. "I don't know how any of this works." "Then let me show you," Damon murmured, lowering his head slowly, giving Ethan every opportunity to pull away. "Let me teach you. Let me be your first." And then Damon's lips were on his, and Ethan's entire world shattered and reformed in an instant. The kiss was gentle, almost chaste, just a soft press of lips against lips, testing, asking permission. But to Ethan, who had spent 28 years untouched and unkissed, it was everything. It was confirmation that he was real, that his desires were real, that he was worthy of being wanted. A sound escaped his throat, something between a sob and a moan, and his hands came up to clutch at Damon's shoulders, needing something solid to anchor himself to as his entire sense of self reorganized around this single point of contact. Damon pulled back slightly, searching Ethan's face, "Okay?" he asked softly. "More," Ethan breathed, surprised by his own boldness. "Please, more." Damon's smile was devastating as he lowered his head again, and this time the kiss was deeper, more demanding. His lips moved against Ethan's with practiced skill, coaxing Ethan's mouth open so his tongue could slip inside, and Ethan gasped at the sensation, hot and wet and intimate in a way that made his knees buckle. Damon's arms came around him, catching him, holding him up as the kiss continued. One large hand splayed across the small of Ethan's back, pulling him closer, while the other cupped the back of his head, fingers threading through Ethan's hair. Ethan had never known that kissing could feel like this, had never imagined the way his entire body would respond, every nerve ending lighting up with pleasure. He could feel Damon's heat through their clothes, could feel the solid muscle of his chest pressed against Ethan's own slighter frame, could feel the evidence of Damon's arousal, thick and hard, pressing against his hip, and that knowledge sent a bolt of desire through him so intense it was almost painful. When Damon finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard, and Ethan's lips felt swollen and sensitized. "That," Damon said, his voice rough, "was your first kiss. How do you feel?" "Alive," Ethan answered honestly, still clutching Damon's shoulders like they were the only things keeping him upright. "I feel alive for the first time in my life." Damon's eyes flashed with something dark and possessive. "Good, because Ethan, that was just the beginning. If you want more, if you want everything, I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to teach you what your body can feel, what pleasure really means. But I need to know you're sure. Because once we start this, once I really touch you, there's no going back to pretending this didn't happen." Ethan knew he should be sensible, should think about the complications and consequences, should remember that this was his workplace, that Damon was the CEO, that there were 1,000 reasons this was a terrible idea. But God, he was so tired of being sensible, so tired of denying himself, so tired of being alone and untouched and invisible. "I'm sure," he said, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. "I want this. I want you. Show me everything." Damon's expression shifted, became hungry and intense in a way that should have scared Ethan, but instead made heat pool low in his belly. "Then lock the door," Damon commanded, his voice dropping to something rough and commanding that sent shivers down Ethan's spine. "And come here." Ethan's legs felt shaky as he crossed to the office door. His hands trembled as he turned the lock, the soft click seeming to echo through the space like a gunshot. This was really happening. He was really doing this. When he turned back, Damon had moved to the large leather couch positioned along one wall of the office. He'd removed his tie and unbuttoned the top few buttons of his shirt, revealing a triangle of smooth brown skin that made Ethan's mouth go dry. "Come here," Damon repeated, his voice gentler now, but no less commanding. He patted the space beside him on the couch. Ethan walked over on unsteady legs, his heart hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat. When he reached the couch, he hesitated, unsure of how to sit, where to put his hands, how to exist in this moment that felt too big and too important. Damon seemed to sense his uncertainty. "Ethan, look at me." When Ethan met his eyes, Damon continued, "We're going to go at your pace. If anything feels wrong or too much, or if you just want to stop, all you have to do is say so. This is about you feeling good, feeling safe, feeling wanted. Nothing else matters. Do you understand?" The care in his words, the way he was putting Ethan's comfort above his own obvious desire, made Ethan's chest ache with emotion he couldn't name. "I understand," Ethan whispered. "But Damon, I don't know what my pace is. I don't know anything about this." "Then we'll figure it out together," Damon said, reaching out to take Ethan's hand and gently pulling him down onto the couch beside him. "Start by sitting here, close to me. Let yourself get used to being near someone." Ethan sat, acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched, their thighs pressed together, Damon's arm along the back of the couch behind his shoulders, the heat radiating from Damon's larger frame. "How does this feel?" Damon asked, his free hand coming up to trace Ethan's jawline with feather-light touches. "Overwhelming," Ethan admitted. But good. Really good. Good, Damon murmured, his fingers continuing their exploration, tracing the shell of Ethan's ear, the curve of his cheekbone, the line of his bottom lip. You're beautiful, Ethan. Has anyone ever told you that? Ethan shook his head, unable to form words as those skilled fingers mapped his face like Damon was memorizing every detail. Well, you are. Your eyes? Damon's thumb brushed across Ethan's eyelid, making it flutter closed. They're this incredible blue-gray, like storm clouds, and your skin is so pale and perfect. I keep wanting to see if it's this soft everywhere. The words sent heat flooding through Ethan's body. No one had ever talked to him like this, had ever looked at him with such open appreciation. Can I kiss you again? Damon asked, even though Ethan had already given permission for so much more. Please, Ethan breathed. This kiss was different from the first, slower, deeper, more thorough. Damon took his time, tasting every corner of Ethan's mouth, teaching him how to respond, how to move his lips and tongue in ways that made them both groan with pleasure. His hand moved to the back of Ethan's neck, pulling him closer, while his other hand settled on Ethan's hip, thumb stroking small circles through the fabric of his uniform. The touch was innocent enough, but it made Ethan hyper-aware of his body, of how much he wanted those hands everywhere. When they finally broke apart for air, Damon rested his forehead against Ethan's. Tell me what you're thinking, he murmured. Tell me what you're feeling. I'm thinking I can't believe this is real, Ethan admitted, his voice shaking slightly. I'm feeling like my entire body is on fire, and I don't know what to do with all of this wanting. That's good, Damon said, pressing a soft kiss to the corner of Ethan's mouth. That's exactly how you should feel. And Ethan, you don't have to do anything with the wanting except let yourself feel it. Let yourself accept that it's okay to desire someone, to want to be touched. I've spent so long trying not to want, Ethan confessed, trying to convince myself I didn't need this, didn't need anyone, and now you're here and you're touching me, and I can't remember why I thought being alone was safer than feeling like this. Damon's expression softened with understanding. Being alone is safer. That's not wrong, but safe doesn't always mean happy. And you deserve to be happy, Ethan. You deserve to feel desired and wanted and cherished. The words broke something open in Ethan's chest, and he found himself surging forward, initiating a kiss for the first time in his life. It was clumsy and desperate, more enthusiasm than skill, but Damon responded with a groan that vibrated through both their bodies. That's it, Damon encouraged when they broke apart. Take what you want from me. Touch me. I'm yours tonight. Emboldened, Ethan let his hands explore the solid planes of Damon's chest through his shirt, feeling the muscle and heat beneath the expensive fabric. His fingers found the buttons, and with shaking hands, he began to unfasten them one by one. Damon watched him with dark, hungry eyes, but he didn't rush, didn't try to speed things along. He let Ethan set the pace, let him reveal each new expanse of skin at his own speed. When the shirt finally hung open, Ethan could only stare. Damon's chest was magnificent, broad and muscled, with smooth brown skin that seemed to glow in the office lighting. Ethan wanted to touch, but his hands hovered uncertainly. Go ahead, Damon said softly. I want you to touch me. Ethan's palms made contact with Damon's chest, and he gasped at the sensation. Warm skin over hard muscle, the steady thrum of Damon's heartbeat beneath his hand. He explored with growing confidence, mapping the contours of Damon's torso, finding the small scars and imperfections that made him real rather than some fantasy. When his fingers brushed across one flat nipple, Damon sucked in a sharp breath, and Ethan froze. Did I hurt you? No, Damon said, his voice strained. That felt good. Really good. Do it again. Ethan did, fascinated by the way Damon's body responded to his touch, by the small sounds of pleasure he could coax from this powerful man. It was intoxicating, this ability to affect someone, to give pleasure instead of just receiving it. Ethan, Damon said, catching his wrist gently, I need you to tell me something. how far do you want to go tonight? Because if we keep going like this, I'm going to want more than just kissing and touching over clothes. I'm going to want to see you, taste you, make you fall apart in my arms. And I need to know if that's what you want too, or if we need to slow down." The directness of the question, the explicit description of what Damon wanted to do to him, sent a wave of desire through Ethan so intense it was almost painful. "I want that," Ethan said, his voice barely audible but steady. "I want all of it. I've waited 28 years, Damon. I don't want to wait anymore." Damon's eyes blazed with heat and something deeper, tenderness, possession, promise. "Then we're going to do this right. Not here on this couch where I can't spread you out properly. Come with me." He stood and held out his hand to Ethan, who took it without hesitation. Damon led him across the office to a door Ethan had noticed before, but never investigated. When Damon opened it, Ethan saw a private bathroom that was larger than his entire studio apartment, all marble and glass and expensive fixtures. But it wasn't the bathroom Damon was interested in. He led Ethan through another door into what appeared to be a private bedroom suite, complete with a king-sized bed covered in dark silk sheets. "I keep this here for late nights when I don't want to drive home," Damon explained, seeing Ethan's surprise. "But right now, I'm grateful for it because it means I get to do this properly. I get to lay you down in a real bed and take my time learning every inch of your body." Ethan's breath came faster at the promise in those words. This was really happening. He was really going to do this. Damon moved to the bed and turned to face him, holding out his hand again. "Come here, Ethan. Let me show you how good it can feel to be wanted." And Ethan, who had spent his entire life running from his truth, finally stopped running. He crossed the room, took Damon's hand, and let himself fall into everything he'd been denying himself. Damon guided Ethan to sit on the edge of the bed, then knelt before him, his large frame somehow both powerful and supplicant in this position. His hands went to the laces of Ethan's worn work shoes, and he began untying them with careful attention. "What are you doing?" Ethan asked, confused by this unexpected turn. "Taking care of you?" Damon said simply, slipping off one shoe and then the other, setting them aside neatly. His hands moved to Ethan's ankles, warm and strong as they wrapped around them. "Every part of this matters, Ethan. I'm not going to rush through this like it's something to get through to get to the good part. All of it's the good part. Understanding?" Ethan nodded, overwhelmed by the tenderness in Damon's actions, by the way he was being treated like something precious rather than just a body to be used. Damon's hands slid up Ethan's calves, his touch firm but gentle through the fabric of his work pants. "These need to come off," he murmured. "Stand up for me." Ethan stood on shaky legs, and Damon rose with him, now towering over him again. His fingers went to the button of Ethan's pants, and he paused. "Still okay?" he asked, his eyes searching Ethan's face for any sign of hesitation. "Yes," Ethan breathed. "Please." Damon unfastened the button and slowly lowered the zipper. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the quiet room. Then he was pushing the pants down Ethan's hips, letting them pool at his feet. Ethan stepped out of them, standing there in just his work shirt and boxer briefs, feeling more exposed and vulnerable than he'd ever felt in his life. Damon's gaze traveled over him with unconcealed appreciation. "Beautiful," he murmured. "So perfect." His hands went to the hem of Ethan's shirt. "Can I take this off too?" Ethan nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Damon pulled the shirt over his head in one smooth motion, and then Ethan was standing there in almost nothing, his pale skin exposed to Damon's hungry gaze. He fought the urge to cover himself, to hide the body he'd never been entirely comfortable with. Too thin, too pale, not muscular enough. But the way Damon was looking at him, like he was the most desirable thing in the world, made Ethan feel beautiful for the first time in his life. "Your turn," Damon said, taking Ethan's hands and placing them on his own chest. "Finish what you started. Undress me." With trembling fingers, Ethan pushed the shirt off Damon's shoulders, revealing the full magnificence of his upper body. Then, emboldened by Damon's encouraging gaze, He reached for his belt. The leather was expensive and smooth under his fingers. He unbuckled it, then unfastened the button and zipper of Damon's dress pants. As he pushed them down over lean hips, he couldn't help but notice the substantial bulge in Damon's boxer briefs, the evidence of his arousal impossible to miss. Ethan's breath caught. Damon was big, much bigger than Ethan had imagined during his private moments of fantasy. The sight sent a mixture of desire and nervousness flooding through him. Damon seemed to read his expression. "We'll take it slow," he promised, cupping Ethan's face in his large hands. "I'm going to make sure you're ready. I'm going to make sure this feels good for you. Trust me?" "I trust you," Ethan said, and meant it with his whole being. Damon smiled and kissed him, deep and thorough, as his hands began to explore Ethan's nearly naked body. He traced the line of his collarbone, the curve of his ribs, the slight dip of his waist. Every touch was reverent, appreciative, like Damon was memorizing him through touch alone. When Damon's hand slid around to cup his bottom, squeezing gently through the thin fabric of his boxer briefs, Ethan gasped into his mouth. "Sensitive there?" Damon murmured against his lips. "Good to know." He guided Ethan backward until his legs hit the bed, then gently pushed him down onto the silk sheets. The fabric was cool and smooth against Ethan's heated skin, and he couldn't suppress a small sound of pleasure. Damon stood at the edge of the bed, looking down at him with such intensity that Ethan felt pinned by his gaze. Then, slowly, deliberately, Damon hooked his thumbs into his boxer briefs and pushed them down. Ethan couldn't look away. Damon was magnificent, his body powerful and perfectly proportioned, and his arousal thick and hard, curving up toward his stomach. Ethan had never seen another man like this, had never allowed himself to even imagine it in detail, and the reality was overwhelming. "You're staring," Damon said, amusement coloring his voice. "I can't help it," Ethan admitted, his voice rough. "You're you're..." He couldn't find words adequate to describe what he was seeing, what he was feeling. Damon's expression softened. "And you're about to be naked too. Fair is fair." He moved onto the bed, kneeling beside Ethan, his hands going to the waistband of Ethan's last piece of clothing. "Lift your hips for me." Ethan obeyed, and Damon stripped away his boxer briefs in one smooth motion, and then they were both completely bare. Nothing between them but air and want. Ethan wanted to cover himself, suddenly self-conscious about his own obvious arousal, about how much smaller he was than Damon in every way. But Damon caught his hands before he could move. "Don't hide from me," Damon said firmly. "You're beautiful, Ethan. Every part of you. Let me see you. Let me appreciate what you're giving me." The words helped, and Ethan forced himself to relax back against the pillows, letting Damon look his fill. "Perfect," Damon breathed, his hand moving to rest on Ethan's chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. "Absolutely perfect. Your body is responding to me beautifully." His hand began to move, trailing down Ethan's torso, and Ethan's breath came faster in anticipation. But instead of touching him where he ached most, Damon's hand moved to his thigh, squeezing the muscle there. "Tonight is about teaching you pleasure," Damon said, his voice low and hypnotic, "about showing you how good your body can feel when it's touched with skill and care. I'm going to explore every inch of you, find all your sensitive spots, learn what makes you gasp and moan, and eventually fall apart completely. And I'm not going to rush. We have all night." True to his word, Damon took his time. His hands and mouth mapped Ethan's body with thorough attention, his neck, his shoulders, his chest. When his mouth closed around one of Ethan's nipples, Ethan arched off the bed with a shocked cry. He'd never known that part of his body could feel like that, never imagined the sharp pleasure that shot straight to his groin. "You like that," Damon observed, pleased, before moving to give the other nipple the same attention. Ethan was writhing beneath him now, soft sounds escaping his throat that he couldn't control. Damon's hand finally moved to wrap around Ethan's arousal, and Ethan nearly came undone right then. The sensation of another person's hand, Damon's large, warm hand, touching him so intimately, was almost too much. "Breathe," Damon instructed gently. "Don't fight the feeling. Just let yourself experience it." He stroked slowly, expertly, his grip firm but not tight, and Ethan felt pleasure building in waves that threatened to crash over him. "I'm going to," Ethan gasped. "I can't. It's too—" "It's okay," Damon soothed. "Let go. Show me how good I'm making you feel." And Ethan did, his body tensing as waves of pleasure washed over him, more intense than anything he'd ever given himself in private moments. He cried out, his hands clutching at the silk sheets as his body shuddered with release. When he finally came back to himself, breathing hard, he found Damon watching him with satisfaction and tenderness. "That was beautiful," Damon murmured, brushing damp hair back from Ethan's forehead. "You're so responsive, so open. I love watching you feel pleasure." Ethan felt embarrassed suddenly. "That was fast. I'm sorry. I should have—" "Should have what?" Damon interrupted gently. "Held back. Hidden your response." "Ethan, that was perfect. That was your body, telling me you feel safe enough to let go, and we're nowhere near done. That was just the beginning." Before Ethan could respond, Damon was kissing his way down Ethan's body, and Ethan realized with a jolt what he intended to do. "You don't have to," Ethan started, but Damon looked up at him with dark, determined eyes. "I want to," he said simply. "I want to taste you, feel you in my mouth, make you fall apart again. Can I do that?" The explicit nature of the question made Ethan's entire body flush with heat. "Yes," he whispered, "please." What happened next was beyond anything Ethan could have imagined. Damon's mouth was hot and skilled, taking his time to learn what Ethan liked, what made his hips buck and his hands twist in Damon's short hair. He built Ethan back up slowly, patiently, until Ethan was begging, actually begging, for release. When it came, it was even more intense than the first time, and Ethan's vision went white at the edges, as pleasure consumed him completely. Damon worked him through it, then moved back up his body to gather him close, pressing soft kisses to his temple, while Ethan trembled with aftershocks. "How do you feel?" Damon asked softly. "Destroyed," Ethan managed, "in the best possible way. I never knew. I didn't understand that it could be like this." "That's because you've never had someone focused entirely on your pleasure before," Damon said. "Someone who wants nothing more than to make you feel good." Ethan's hand moved tentatively to Damon's hip, feeling the heat of his skin, the hard muscle beneath. "What about you? You haven't— I want to make you feel good too." Damon's expression was tender. "You're making me feel good. Watching you respond to me, hearing the sounds you make, feeling you come apart in my hands. That gives me more pleasure than you can imagine." "But you didn't—" Ethan gestured vaguely at Damon's still obvious arousal. "We have all night," Damon reminded him. "And there's something else I want to do first. Something that will feel incredible for you and will drive me out of my mind with want. But only if you're ready. Only if you want it." Ethan met his eyes, seeing the barely restrained hunger there, the desire held in check by iron will and concern for Ethan's comfort. "I want it," he said. "Whatever it is, I want to experience it with you." Damon groaned softly and kissed him deeply. "You're going to be the death of me," he murmured against Ethan's lips. So eager, so willing, so perfectly responsive. His hand slid down Ethan's body, moving between his legs, and Ethan understood what Damon intended. His entire body tensed with nervousness and anticipation. "Relax," Damon soothed, his free hand stroking Ethan's hip. "I'm going to prepare you properly. It might feel strange at first, but I promise it's going to feel good. Trust me?" "I trust you," Ethan repeated, forcing his body to relax. Damon reached over to the nightstand and pulled out supplies. Clearly he kept things here for occasions exactly like this. The thought that Damon had brought other people to this private space briefly made Ethan jealous before Damon spoke. "No one else has been here," he said, as if reading Ethan's mind. "I keep these things here for my own private needs, but I've never brought anyone else to this room. You're the first person I've wanted to share this space with." The confession made Ethan's heart swell. He was the first. That seemed significant somehow. Damon's preparations were thorough and patient. His fingers worked magic, finding places inside Ethan that sent sparks of pleasure through his entire nervous system. Ethan writhed on the silk sheets, gasping as Damon stretched and prepared him with maddening slowness. "Please," Ethan finally begged. I need more. I need you." Damon's control was clearly hanging by a thread. "Are you sure? Once we do this, Ethan, you won't be able to forget it. Won't be able to pretend you don't want this, don't need this." "I don't want to forget," Ethan said fiercely. "I don't want to pretend anymore. I want to remember this night for the rest of my life. Please, Damon, make me yours." The words seemed to break whatever remaining restraint Damon had. He positioned himself carefully, his eyes locked on Ethan's face, and began to push inside. The sensation was overwhelming, a stretch and burn that bordered on too much, combined with a feeling of fullness that made Ethan gasp. Damon moved slowly, giving Ethan time to adjust, murmuring words of encouragement and praise. "That's it," he said, his voice strained with the effort of holding still. "You're taking me so well. You're perfect, Ethan. So perfect." When he was fully seated, they both paused, breathing hard. Ethan felt completely filled, possessed, claimed in a way that went beyond the physical. "How does it feel?" Damon asked, his forehead pressed against Ethan's. "Like I'm finally whole," Ethan whispered. "Like this is what I've been missing my entire life without knowing it." Damon's kiss was almost violent in its intensity, and then he began to move. Long, slow strokes that hit places inside Ethan he didn't know existed, sending pleasure cascading through his body in waves. "You feel incredible," Damon groaned. "So tight, so hot. I've never felt anything like this." Ethan couldn't form words anymore. He could only hold on as Damon moved inside him, could only surrender to the sensations overwhelming his body, could only accept the pleasure being given to him with such skill and care. When Damon's hand wrapped around him again, stroking in time with his movements, Ethan felt himself building toward another climax. This one was different, deeper, more all-consuming, originating from somewhere in his core, rather than just the surface of his skin. "That's it," Damon encouraged, his rhythm becoming less controlled, more urgent. "Come for me, Ethan. Let me feel you." Ethan shattered, his body clenching around Damon as pleasure exploded through every nerve ending. He heard himself cry out Damon's name, heard Damon answer with his own groan of completion, felt the hot pulse of Damon's release inside him. They collapsed together, both breathing hard, hearts racing in tandem. Damon carefully withdrew and gathered Ethan close, wrapping him in strong arms that made him feel safe and cherished. "Are you okay?" Damon asked softly after their breathing had calmed. "I wasn't too rough? Nothing hurts?" "I'm perfect," Ethan said honestly. I don't have words for what that was. Thank you. You don't thank someone for giving you pleasure, Ethan. Not when the pleasure was entirely mutual." Damon pressed a kiss to his temple. "You were incredible. So responsive, so trusting. I've never experienced anything like that." They lay together in comfortable silence for a while, Ethan processing everything that had just happened, trying to reconcile this new reality with everything he'd believed about himself for 28 years. "What are you thinking?" Damon asked eventually, his hand stroking up and down Ethan's arm in a soothing rhythm. "I'm thinking that I can't believe this is real. That in a few hours, I'm going to have to go back to my regular life, and I don't know how to do that now. How do I go back to being invisible when you've made me feel so seen?" Damon was quiet for a moment. Then he propped himself up on one elbow to look down at Ethan. "Who says you have to go back to being invisible? Who says this has to be just one night?" Ethan's heart stuttered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to see you again. Not just as my late-night cleaning person, but as Ethan. The man who trusted me with his first time. The man who makes me feel things I haven't felt in years. If you want that too, if you're willing to see where this goes, then we don't have to treat tonight like a one-time thing." Hope and fear warred in Ethan's chest. "But you're the CEO. I'm a cleaner. The complications would be, I don't care about complications, Damon said firmly. I've spent 20 years building this company, and in all that time, I've never met anyone who made me feel the way you do. Like I'm more than just my success, like I'm seen as a person rather than a position. That's rare, Ethan. That's precious. And I'm not going to let it slip away because of social expectations or corporate hierarchy. I don't know how to do this, Ethan admitted. I don't know how to be with someone. I've never dated, never had a relationship. I don't know the rules. Then we'll figure out the rules together, Damon said. We'll take it slow, let it develop naturally. No pressure, no expectations beyond honesty and spending time together. Can you do that? Ethan searched Damon's face, looking for any sign that this was pity or a fleeting attraction that would fade with the morning. But all he saw was sincerity, desire, and something that looked like genuine affection. Yes, he said finally. I can do that. I want to do that. Damon's smile was brilliant. Good. Then here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here with me tonight. Actually sleep beside me. Wake up beside me. Tomorrow you're going to give me your phone number, and I'm going to call you to set up a proper date. Dinner, maybe a movie. Normal things that normal people do when they're interested in each other. And we're going to see where this goes. Sound good? That sounds perfect, Ethan said, his chest tight with emotion. But Damon, I still have to clean the rest of this floor tonight. I'm already behind schedule. Damon laughed, the sound rich and warm. Forget the cleaning. I'll call your supervisor in the morning and tell them you were helping me with an urgent late-night project. You're not leaving this room tonight. The possessiveness in his tone sent a thrill through Ethan. Okay, he agreed. I'll stay. They settled back down together, Ethan's head on Damon's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt like he belonged somewhere, like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Ethan? Damon said softly after a while. Yeah? Thank you for trusting me, for letting me be your first. That's a gift I don't take lightly. Thank you for seeing me, Ethan replied, for making me feel like I matter. You do matter, Damon said fiercely, more than you know. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other, and Ethan's last thought before sleep claimed him was that maybe, just maybe, he'd finally found what he'd been searching for his entire life. The next few weeks passed in a blur of discovery and growing intimacy. True to his word, Damon called the next day to set up their first official date. They went to a quiet restaurant where they talked for hours, learning the details of each other's lives beyond that first intense night. Ethan learned that Damon had grown up poor in Detroit, that he'd put himself through college working 3 jobs, that he'd built his company from nothing through sheer determination and vision, that he loved jazz and old movies, that he volunteered at youth centers in his free time, that beneath the powerful CEO exterior was a man who valued kindness and authenticity above all else. Damon learned about Ethan's childhood in that small town, about his parents who'd never understood him, about his escape to the city and the years he'd spent hiding from himself, about his love of books and quiet spaces, about the dreams he'd set aside when survival became his only goal. They saw each other as often as their schedules allowed. Dinners, walks through the city, quiet evenings in Damon's penthouse where they talked and kissed and slowly explored the physical connection between them. Damon was patient with Ethan's inexperience, teaching him what he liked, encouraging him to explore and experiment, always making sure Ethan felt safe and valued. Each time they came together, Ethan felt himself opening up more, trusting more, accepting that this was real and lasting rather than a dream that would evaporate. But there were challenges too. The reality of their different worlds became more apparent as they tried to navigate a relationship. Damon's social circle of wealthy executives and power brokers didn't quite know what to make of Ethan when Damon brought him to events. Ethan felt out of place among people who'd never worried about rent or where their next meal was coming from. And then there was the work situation. After a month of dating, it became clear that Ethan couldn't continue working for the cleaning company that serviced Kane Enterprises. The potential for conflict of interest, for accusations of impropriety, was too great. Damon had a solution. "Come work for me directly," he said one evening as they lay together in his bed. "Not as a cleaner, as my executive assistant. You're smart, organized, detail-oriented. You'd be perfect for it." But Ethan hesitated. "I don't have the qualifications. I don't have a college degree, don't have office experience. People would say you only hired me because we're sleeping together." "So what if they do?" Damon challenged. "Let them talk. I know your worth and you'll prove it through your work, unless you don't want the job, in which case I'll help you find something else. But Ethan, I'm not going to hide our relationship. I'm not going to pretend you're not important to me to make other people comfortable." The declaration made Ethan's heart swell. No one had ever been willing to claim him publicly before, to acknowledge that he mattered. "Okay," he said, "I'll try it. But if I'm terrible at it, you have to promise to fire me." Damon laughed. "Deal, but you won't be terrible. You're gonna be amazing." And surprisingly, he was. Ethan took to the executive assistant role naturally. His attention to detail, his ability to anticipate needs, his calm presence, all the skills that had made him an excellent cleaner, translated well to office work. He learned quickly, worked hard, and within a few months, he'd become indispensable to Damon's operation. The gossip happened, of course. Speculation about the CEO and his assistant, knowing looks and whispered conversations. But Damon dealt with it head on, making it clear in a company-wide meeting that he and Ethan were in a relationship, that Ethan had been hired based on merit, and that anyone who had a problem with either of those facts could discuss it with him directly. The gossip died down after that, and Ethan found himself slowly being accepted by the staff. His competence spoke for itself, and eventually, people stopped seeing him as the CEO's boyfriend and started seeing him as a valued member of the team. 6 months after that first night in Damon's office, they moved in together, Damon's penthouse becoming their shared home. Ethan's few possessions looked tiny in the massive space at first, but Damon encouraged him to make it his own, to add his touches until it felt like their space rather than just Damon's. They developed rhythms and routines, morning coffee together before heading to work, evenings spent cooking dinner and talking about their days, weekends exploring the city or staying in bed late, learning new ways to bring each other pleasure. Ethan grew more confident in himself, in his worth, in his right to take up space in the world. The shy, invisible man who'd walked into that office 6 months ago was still part of him, but now he'd added layers. Confidence from being valued at work, security from being loved, pride in his own growth and development. And through it all, Damon was his anchor, patient when Ethan had moments of doubt, supportive when Ethan wanted to try new things, loving in ways both big and small that made Ethan feel cherished every day. 1 year after that first night, Damon took Ethan back to his office, the same space where everything had begun. "I want to show you something," Damon said, leading him to the corner where the couch stood. Ethan looked at it with a smile, remembering. "This is where we first kissed." "It is," Damon agreed, "and it's where I first realized that I was falling in love with you." Ethan's breath caught. They'd said "I love you" months ago, but hearing Damon talk about that first night still made his heart race. "I knew that night that you were special," Damon continued, "that what I was feeling wasn't just attraction or desire, but something deeper, something that could change my entire life if I was brave enough to reach for it." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Ethan's heart stopped completely. "Ethan Cross," Damon said, dropping to one knee. "You walked into my office a year ago and changed everything. You showed me what it meant to really connect with someone, to be seen and valued for who I am rather than what I've accomplished. You've made me happier than I ever thought possible, and I want to spend the rest of my life making you just as happy." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. "Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Ethan's face as he looked at this incredible man kneeling before him, offering everything. "Yes," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "God, yes. 1,000 times yes." Damon stood and slipped the ring onto his finger. then kissed him with a passion that still made Ethan's knees weak, even after a year together. "I love you," Damon murmured against his lips. "My Ethan, my beautiful, brave, perfect Ethan." "I love you too," Ethan said. "Thank you for seeing me, for making me believe I was worth being seen." They stood there in that office, wrapped in each other, and Ethan thought about the journey that had brought him here. From that scared, invisible man pushing a cleaning cart to this, loved, valued, claimed by someone who saw all of him and wanted him anyway. He'd spent 28 years running from his truth, hiding from his desires, convincing himself he was better off alone. But Damon had shown him that the bravest thing he could do was stop running, stop hiding, stop pretending he didn't need connection and intimacy and love. And now, looking at his future husband, Ethan knew he would never be invisible again. He would never have to hide, because he'd found someone who not only saw him but celebrated him, who'd helped him become the man he was always meant to be.